So let me admit this from the get-go. I'm a huge fan of Jordan B. Peterson, a Canadian psychologist. He's a professor. He's also a renowned author. He has written several books. The most popular is 12 Rules to Life, an antidote to chaos. A very interesting book. You should read that book. So maybe beginning 2017, 2018, it became a huge sensation on the internet and in the mainstream media at some point. He has these opinions that tend to rub some people the wrong way, and he's always being interviewed, and you can always feel like people want to get out some information from him which will make him controversial or more controversial. And there's this time that a journalist asked him, "Do you believe in God?" And I saw where the question was coming from, because for a long time I was watching his interviews, and he tended to avoid that question, even though he teaches a lot about the Bible. But he tends, he still does to date, to kind of like not come out clear and say, I believe in God or I don't believe in God. So this journalist asks him, and he's like, he wanted him to come out clear and say whether he believes in God or he doesn't. And Jordan Peterson, he says that was a very complex question. It was like he got frustrated, and he came out so strong with emotions, and he told the journalist, what do you believe? What exactly do you believe by the word? What exactly do you mean by the word believe, one? And what do you mean by the word God? And even though it came, I felt it was profound that, yeah, we should start from there. When you ask someone, do you believe in God? What do you believe by the words believe and God? Because sometimes we take these words so casually. Do you believe in God? Yes, I believe in God. No, I don't believe in God. But I never appreciated the profoundness of his statement or his questions until I read this book that now I'm going to be talking about for a while. And that's the book, The Guide for the Perplexed by Maimonides. It's quite a difficult name for me to pronounce. Yeah, so until I read The Guide for the Perplexed, as I was reading The Guide for the Perplexed, that conversation came back to me. And I even saw a lot more. I saw more about the question Jordan P. Peterson was asking, like, yeah, the question of do you believe in God is not as simple as we assume. It's so complex because there is a lot that we assume by asking that question. There is a lot of assumptions that goes into asking that question and even answering it. So as I was reading this book, that conversation came back to me, and I saw how profound that was. Now, The Guide for the Perplexed is a book that was written slightly over 1,000 years ago, or about 1,000 years ago, by this guy. He's called Moses ben Maimon is Moses, son of Maimon. He was a Jewish scholar and philosopher, and he was also, I think, at some point he was a religious teacher. Um, so the book has a lot, and here is what it is. For a long time, or have, maybe I should say, for up until me reading this book, there was always this assumption behind that science and religion are like opposites. Like it's either religion or science. There is no way the two come together. There is that, and even when you hear people talk, especially about religion, there is there is always this assumption of science is science and religion is religion. They are separate. In fact, some people want to think of them as opposites, and exclusive, like mutually exclusive is the word. So I'm going to go through this book. I'm going to record a lot of videos, and I promise you I'll try as much as possible to bring out what my Maimonides explains. I might not do justice to the book, but I'll try my best. So the book, when he wrote the book, some other people have told us, and in particular Michael Friedlander, who was a principal of a Jewish college in London. This guy lived around 1833 to 1910. He's the person who first translated this book into English. And he did collect some information about Maimonides, and he has shared this in his translation of the book. And this is where we get some background information about him. So the next video is about his flow of his life. This I'm going to tell you who the book is written for. Now, Friedlander tells us that the initial target, or this book was dedicated to a guy known as Joseph Ibn Aknin. And Joseph Ibn Aknin was a student of Maimonides. He was a disciple of Maimonides. And Maimonides himself tells us that Joseph had come to him with very difficult questions about religion and science. And he needed answers to these questions, but they were very complex questions. And Maimonides decided to write a book that explains in detail the conflict and the merging of religion and science. And Maimonides does a very good job. This is the first book I read that I realize maybe I've had the wrong impression of what religion is. And especially the understanding of the relationship between religion and science. So he wrote this book for Joseph ibn Kanin, who is Jehuda bin Aknin. This was his disciple, as I've said. But at some point, as he was still writing the book, he turned out to become his son-in-law. He married his daughter by the name Kima. So Joseph ibn Aknin married Maimonides' daughter, and he became his son-in-law. So he wrote this book for him. But unfortunately, by the time he's finishing writing the book and the book is ready to present it to Joseph ibn Aknin, Joseph ibn Aknin had differed with Kima, and they had separated. And because of that, of course, you will understand there were feelings. And in fact, Joseph started accusing Maimonides that Maimonides contributed to the collapse or the destruction of the marriage, if I might use that word. And in particular, because Maimonides did not encourage his daughter to go back to the husband. So he had those negative feelings towards Maimonides. And because of that, he never came to appreciate the wisdom in the book, The Guide for the Perplexed, even though the book was written to him, because he had asked questions. He had reached this point at the time he was asking Maimonides to write this or to explain to him some of these questions. It seems like Joseph was a very scientific, logical kind of a guy, but he still wanted to remain religious, but he was finding it difficult to continue being religious, considering what he was learning from his science classes, maybe. So he had reached a point where he was finding it hard to reconcile his religious beliefs with his scientific knowledge. And that's why he asked Maimonides to write this book, or to explain to him, and Maimonides decided to write this book. So Maimonides writes this book explaining how science and religion merge, and how, in fact, he brings out very well that the basic and the core of religion is science, is metaphysics. And in fact, he says just that at some point, some elements within the religion hijacked and made religion seem like it's more of imagination and creating these imaginary things. And then most people came to believe that that's what religion is. But the way he explains it, and I'm going to go into details as we go through the book, is that science, and specifically metaphysics and even physics, algebra, all those form the foundation of religion. And in fact, at some point he says, you never understand religious doctrines or religious teachings accurately if you don't start with a foundation of science, that you have to study science, physics, chemistry, algebra, and then you move to metaphysics, and with that becomes the foundation of religion. And the way he explains all these things in the book, it seems like for Judaism, for Christianity, but mostly Judaism and Islam, these are religions that were so anchored in this scientific foundation. And these were the core of those religions that the people needed to. Anybody who was serious and wanted to understand religion, Islam or Judaism, and even Christianity to some extent, needed to start with that base of science. Now, I said this guy did not appreciate the book, but now the book has gone on to become one of the most appreciated philosophical books, especially around religion and philosophy. It's a book that is widely read, and the book now is, I think, as a writer, Maimonides did a good job by targeting this book to a specific person, audience, that is his son-in-law, but who it wasn't really him. He became like a symbol or a representative of a wider audience of people who were in the situation that this Joseph guy found himself in. And there are so many of those people in modern day, people who, especially with now, I think during those 1,000 years ago, the general public was not really exposed to science and logic and philosophy, but now many people are. And then more and more people find themselves in this juncture of they still want to be religious, but they look here, this science, physics, whatever, and they think these two collide or conflict, and because of that, sometimes they are forced to abandon religion, or abandon religion and became what they can describe as secularists, or some go to the extent of saying, okay, I'm an atheist because religion is completely out of logic. It doesn't make sense when you compare it with science, and science is what we use to prove things. Now, that's the crowd Maimonides was writing for, or he wrote this book for. And if you read, and I'm one of those who were in that category. For a long time, I've struggled with science and religion, and I've moved back and forth. At some point, I was a religious person. At some point, I was like, no, I'm an atheist. And then at some point in my recent years, I came to just say, okay, let me say I don't know, and just be there, because some of these things are a lot more complex than we think. And he speaks, reading the books, I found it like he was speaking directly to me and my situation, and me being perplexed, as the title he uses for the book. And he did push me through some things, which we are going to go through. So as I've said, the book will tries to help the reader reconcile religious beliefs and science, and in particular Jewish belief, and and Islam and Christianity with science. So yeah, so that's the book we are starting. So look forward for more videos now on specific points that he brings out. These are very long book. We might end up having like over 100 videos. I'll try to make it worthwhile for you. If you are watching for the first time, you just subscribe, and then I'll do my best to share with you the best that I've learned from this book.